Hi, this is Stuart McLennan. I'd like to present briefly the results of our qualitative study. So, new clinical research requires a systematic assessment of the existing evidence, but this is often lacking, and research on the barriers and facilitators for a systematic approach is currently limited. So the aim of our project was to examine the practices and attitudes of Swiss stakeholders and international funders regarding conducting systematic evidence assessments in academic clinical trials. So we conducted qualitative interviews with a total of 57 people. 48 of those participants came from Switzerland, and 9 were international funders with a reputation of taking a systematic approach. So the findings in terms of the current practice, we found that most Swiss investigators are currently not systematically reviewing existing evidence, and it was estimated that this would only happen in about 10 to 30% of trials. In contrast, international funders had a very clear expectation that academic clinical trial proposals included some form of systematic evidence assessment. However, there was large variations in terms of the types of evidence assessment required and when it is required. In terms of barriers, Swiss participants identified three main groups. Firstly, around investigator perceptions. Many had the view that they were experts in the field and already knew the relevant research. The view that their study is very innovative, so there was limited evidence available, and some had the belief that an evidence-based approach could be achieved without a formal systematic review. Some also identified a number of practical challenges, including perceiving systematic reviews to be very time-consuming, a lack of specific funds, insufficient personnel with the right expertise, and a lack of awareness and knowledge by investigators and funding panels. Participants also reported that funders of academic clinical trials and also ethics committees in Switzerland are currently not requiring systematic reviews, and how the existing research is reviewed is left up to investigators. In contrast, international funders did not perceive any substantial barriers. Investigators were seen to have sufficient awareness and knowledge and generally accepted the funders' expectations regarding evidence assessment. However, they also identified the practical challenges of time and resources as the main practical barriers for formal systematic reviews. So in terms of facilitators, many Swiss participants felt that the best way to facilitate systematic evidence assessments was for funders to make it mandatory. However, they also acknowledged that any such requirement would need to be combined with better support from academic institutions and associated clinical support organisations. In contrast, a number of international funders highlighted how evidence assessment communities have become firmly established in their country, which had been very important for promoting a systematic approach. Moving forward, some felt that it would be helpful to provide investigators with more explicit requirements to clarify the level of comprehensiveness expected for each clinical trial. So in conclusion, as far as we're aware, this is the first qualitative study conducted on this issue. It found general agreement that new clinical trials should be justified by a systematic evidence assessment, but there was large variation in terms of expected comprehensiveness and transparency of evidence assessments. Formal systematic reviews are currently not expected and not conducted before most academic clinical trials at the moment, but most international funders expect a systematic search for the existing evidence. I think the results also showed that the Swiss research ecosystem is not as supportive of a systematic approach compared to many of the international settings that were included in our study. So moving forward towards a more evidence-based research approach in academic clinical trials, this requires a number of changes. In Switzerland, we would think that Swiss funders need to raise the requirement for this. There needs to be more explicit requirements and more capacity building around training. Thank you very much.